Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to a very special episode of the Fandom Zone podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Charles Skaggs, back in the Fandom Zone, ready to talk something very, very special to my personal taste and a certain other person's taste who I'm going to talk about. So I got to introduce my wonderful two co-hosts this time. Joining us all the way from Dallas, Texas, or at least the Fort Worth area, somewhere in there. Jesse Jackson, welcome back to the Fandom Zone podcast. Yay!
Hey, Charles. Boy, I really like what you guys have done with the place. It's been a couple of, it's been a few episodes, and I see there's, you've got a new lamp. You kind of got a new piece of artwork. The place looks great. I love it. And you know what? You've kept my chair all broken in. I feel just like right back at home.
Why it's just like you never left your home. That's great.
Exactly.
So Jesse, I know you've been off for a while. Nick and I, DJ Nick, who I have to also introduce. So welcome back to the podcast, Nick, as we just finished talking the boys with you. It just feels like we just finished it up last week.
Yes.
Oh, we did.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's so weird. But yeah, hey, Charles, I'm doing wonderful. It's super wonderful to have Jesse back in the Fandom Zone as well. Been missing him for sure. And I'm so happy that he is back. And how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Me, my usual self. I'm perfectly healthy as always, but, I'm getting by. And obviously doing lots of podcasts. And just enjoying the wonderful experience of watching the episode we're going to be discussing here at episode 199, The Flash 1990 pilot. So this is something that we haven't covered on the Fandom Zone before, even when way back, when Karen Lindsay was co-hosting the Fandom Zone with yours truly. So I thought, we were trying to come up with ideas about what to talk about for this episode and our upcoming 200th episode, and it seemed like that was the general consensus. Nick was quick out of the box going, I want to talk The Flash.
Yes, like a bolt from the blue, literally.
So Jesse was kind enough to go along with our obsessions, so I want to give Jesse much credit in that regard. Yay.
Well, I mean...
Thank you, Jesse, for going along with our nonsense.
No. I think this is great. And spoilers, we'll talk in a minute.
Yeah.
I thought your 1-2 punch to do 199 and 200 was perfect.
Yeah.
And so I think this is a great match. And, I love the fact that Nick has become such a podcast brother to both of us.
Right.
That he's been on Set Listing Bruce. He's been on Next Stop Everywhere. He stepped up for Titan Talk when you guys were talking Doom Patrol, and the same thing when I had a lot going on. He's done this. And so he really does feel like, one of the brothers, that it just is. And so I love you so much, and I appreciate your support. And Charles, thank you as always, kind of keeping a space warm. It would be very easy for you to go, hey, look, Jesse, if you can't do this every week or every other week, I got to move on. And you've been like, nah, man, just when you're passionate about it, jump in. With not, Nick and I got this. So
yeah,
love you both.
Oh, love you too, Jesse. That was very sweet of you. And
back at you, Jesse. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to go on the record that, Jesse, you're always welcome here in the Phantom Zone. We love talking with you, and we know you've got a lot going on yourself with work and other podcasts. So I understand if you're busy, or maybe certain shows that we're talking about aren't in your wheelhouse, and that's cool.
Right.
But I want you to know you're always invited. And I'm definitely looking forward to this episode and our upcoming 200th. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
I think so, too.
And hopefully our big secret plan is that you enjoy yourself so much you want to stick around. So we'll see.
Absolutely. All right.
Yes. As I tap my fingers like Montgomery Burns in The Simpsons going, excellent.
Yes.
All right. So like I said, here we're episode 199. We're talking the Flash 1990 pilot. This was, of course, the original Flash series starring John Wesley Shipp as the Flash, Barry Allen. The pilot aired way back on September 20th, 1990. So that was a big year for TV, big year for yours truly, because, hey, that was the year Twin Peaks came out. So I got The Flash and Twin Peaks in the same year, so I was very, very happy. This pilot was written by showrunners and creators Danny Bilson and Paul DeMeo, who actually years later went on to write 12 issues of The Flash, the Fastest Man Alive for DC Comics, featuring an aged adult Bart Allen, the grandson of Barry Allen, taking over the role very briefly as the Flash. And Paul DeMeo was one that actually wrote another episode of the Flash 1990 series, Honor Among Thieves, and this pilot was directed by Robert Iscove. Cast this time, of course, we had the great John Wesley Shipp as the Flash Barry Allen, who returns years later, decades later, actually, in Crisis on Infinite Earths, the big CW Arrowverse crossover, which made, of course, a lot of us very, very happy to see. In the meantime, though, he's played other characters on the Flash 2014 series. So he's played Dr. Henry Allen and Jay Garrick, the Earth 2 Flash. It's great to have him being willing to continue his relationship with the show all these years later. He also voiced Professor Zoom on Batman Brave and the Bold. And if you're a Dawson's Creek fan, you probably recognize him as Mitch Leary, Dawson's dad. And that was very cool. And then he turned up on another Bilson and DeMeo series that was based on a DC Comics character, Human Target, in 1992.
And Charles also wanted to add, for you Neverending Story fans, he was Bastion's father in the Neverending Story too.
Right. Yeah, the sequel that everybody kind of forgets about, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose.
One of the great highlights of the 1990 series is, of course, Amanda Pays as Dr. Christina Tina McGee, and she also reprises the role on the Flash 2014 show, playing a slightly different version of her 1990 character. She's best known to people like me, big hardcore sci-fi geeks like me, by playing Theora Jones on the Max Headroom series, which I was a big fan of back in the 80s. She's also been on episodes of The X-Files and was in the Rob Lowe film Oxford Blues. Alex Desert plays Julio Mendez, who is essentially Barry Allen's assistant in the Central City Crime Lab. And he was actually also reprising his role on the 2014 Flash TV show, where he played a Central City Police Department captain version of Julio Mendez. So it's kind of cool that the 2014 show actually brought back all three of John Wesley Shipp, Amanda Pays, and Alex Desert.
Well,
Very true.
Charles, as we've mentioned many times, you and I, Starman is one of our favorite series, and one of the reasons why James Robinson work meant so much to us is he, in that epic tale he wrote, he included every possible person that ever had the mantle Starman and worked it into a really great tale. So I love when the Arrowverse or, the modern hero DC series weave in, their predecessors in a good way, not just, here's a quick cameo. They've actually made it really personable, and it's a kind of treat for us fans.
Yeah, it's one of the great things that Greg Berlanti, head of the Berlantiverse, shall we say, of CW's Arrowverse shows, has an affinity apparently for the old Flash TV series, and kind of even made it continuity by giving it its own Earth 90, during the big Crisis on Infinite Earths event that made that previous show actually count a little bit in the modern day, made it canon once again. So I got to give him a lot of credit. I'm sure he and the other Flash showrunners worked really hard to make that happen behind the scenes, so I want to give them credit. And, just it's great that they had such an affinity for this original show, even though it only lasted one season. Alex Desert also, I should mention, recently signed on to do he's the new voice of Carl Carlson and Officer Lou on The Simpsons. Yeah, so I thought that was kind of cool. And he's also played Nick Fury on Wolverine and the X-Men and Avengers Earth Mightiest Heroes animated series. He's also been in a couple cool movies, High Fidelity, starring John Cusack, and Swingers. We had Vito D'Ambrosio as Officer Tony Bellows, and he also returns to the 2014 Flash TV series, this time as Mayor of Central City. So Officer Bellows obviously moved up in the world a little bit from just a beat cop.
He did okay.
Yeah, he did, and we love that. And we love that couple in that first season. There's two cops in the entire throughout the season.
Yeah,
are just fantastic in it, Charles. I mean, they're two of my.
Yeah, Biff Menard plays Officer Michael Francis Murphy. And essentially,
Murphy and Bellows.
And essentially, Bellows and Murphy are like the comic relief.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, they're the kind of bumbling around cops who either have to go like, oh my God, it's the Flash, or usually end up taking villains into custody only to have them escape because of their incompetence.
Yeah, the most incompetent cops ever. Yeah. But we love them even for their incompetence, I suppose.
Exactly. One of the most notable actors in this pilot, Paula Marshall, plays Iris West, who sadly does not continue on past the pilot. And she, I'm sure, is very well known to a certain DJ Nick because, well, hey, she was in Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth.
Yes. She was better in Hellraiser 3 than in this, Charles. Believe me, I'm one of those people, we'll get into it, but I did not miss Iris West. I'm just going to say that.
Or at least this version of Iris West, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But she's also appeared on the Superboy TV series. She was also on The Wonder Years, Spin City, Veronica Mars, and House.
Yeah, Paula Marshall is one of my favorites. I first kind of had a crush on her in Rob Thomas's first series, The First Cupid, with Jeremy Piven. She had a wonderful 3-episode visit on Sports Night where she played a porn star that fell in love with Jeremy, and just she's one of my favorite actresses. And so I tweeted that I had forgotten she was on there, and I realized I thought she may have died this episode because I didn't remember her being on the other show, so I kind of was half expecting her because I did not remember. One of my favorite actresses. She's just absolutely I have a major crush on her, and so that was kind of a nice surprise for me to see her.
Well, you haven't lived until you've seen Paula Marshall getting her skin stripped off in Hellraiser 3. I'm just saying.
Okay, well,
that's Skinless Sandy. Okay. I'm just saying.
All right.
I'm just throwing that out there. Character actor named M. Emmett Walsh plays Henry Allen, Barry's dad, who's a bit of a dick in this a little bit. Mm-hmm. But he's a notable character actor. He's famous to a lot of people because he played Captain Bryant, Rick Deckard's boss, in Blade Runner, the original Blade Runner from 1982. And he's been in episodes of also The X-Files. He was in the Steve Martin movie, The Jerk. He's been in Fletch. And something I thought was pretty cool, he was in Escape from the Planet of the Apes back in the day.
And so he was.
That was cool. Priscilla Pointer plays Nora Allen, Barry's mother. And she's notable to probably people who listen to myself on Ghost with the Twin Peaks podcast because she played Mrs. Beaumont, Jeffrey Beaumont's mom. It was like Kyle MacLachlan's mom in Blue Velvet, which is a great David Lynch film, my personal favorite David Lynch film. She was also in the 1976 Carrie, Twilight Zone the movie, A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. And we also had Michael Nader as Nicholas Pike, who is more known to soap opera fans because he was on the 1983 Dynasty with Joan Collins, and he was also on All My Children here in the States. And we had a notable kind of D-list movie actor, Tim Thomerson, playing Jay Allen, Barry's brother, interestingly enough, in this continuity. So essentially, Jay Garrick was recrafted, and we'll talk about this, as giving as a brother for Barry, a brother he never had in the comics. So
But also, Charles, it's
Yes.
interesting that our villain and our hero both come from soap operas.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, because John Wesley Shipp has that soap opera background as well. Was he on like The Guiding Light or something like that?
I think so.
One of those, wasn't? Yeah, I think it was like a doctor or something. I don't know if it was either Emergency Room or Lord knows which one, because unfortunately my soap opera fandom is limited at best. But I do know friends, girlfriends of mine who are like, oh yeah, I love John Wesley Shipp in such and such a soap opera. I mean, he does have the soap opera good looks. I can see that.
Yeah, I can totally see that too. But Tim Thomerson appeared in The Incredible Hulk Returns, one of those TV movies. I think that was the one where Thor appears.
Yes.
And that was interesting, if you remember that one from the 90s. He was also on Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, Hunter, and Mork and Mindy. And then we also, if you're, just for the sake of crediting her, Mariko Say plays Linda Park, who is another character in this one that, taken from the comics, but in the comics she was Wally West's love interest and eventually his wife. And here she's an older version and placed in this Barry Allen universe, TV universe. So it's a little different, kind of like with Tina McGee, because Tina McGee was also a love interest of Wally West.
Well, I mean, a lot of the Wally West stuff does bleed in because I believe comic book wise we were way into the Wally West run at this point, so it probably makes sense that they would pick from the Wally West run in that sense.
Yeah, and I thought that was kind of a nice, just kind of a little Easter egg for us fans, though back then we weren't calling them Easter eggs, I don't think. Were we, Charles? In 90? I don't know.
When DVDs came out, we started calling them Easter eggs.
Okay.
Yeah.
So probably, like when 1990, early 1990s, that was probably VHS still.
Okay.
Because I remember getting like the Flash pilot on VHS, which I have right here.
I see you do. Yeah. So it wasn't as something, right, that we remembered as that time, but I like watching it this morning. I went, oh, look, that was kind of a nice little, instead of just picking any name, they picked someone from the comics, which I thought was kind of nice.
Yeah.
It was kind of like what they did in the better things they did in the Daredevil movie, the Ben Affleck one, where pretty much every single person name checked was either an artist or a writer on Daredevil.
Yeah, little nods, like referencing like Frank Miller or Joe Quesada or something like that. Yeah, I totally get that. David Mazzucchelli, that kind of thing. Yeah. So before we get into trivia, I want to kind of get both of your general thoughts on watching this. Jesse, because we're old enough, we've actually watched this. We actually watched this on CBS way back in 1990. But Nick comes from a little different back because he's a youngin'.
Yes.
He's just a baby.
So I'm trying to remember if I was active in 1990 on Titan Talk. I can't remember. I know, I think it was later in my run. I think it was later in the 90s when I got into it.
And Titan Talk being the Titans, the Teen Titans Amateur Press Association fan group that both you and I had been a part of.
Yes, that is our secret origin.
Yes.
So not secret origin.
I'm just trying to explain that for people who might not be familiar
absolutely.
with that. Yeah.
I remember, Charles, because this is after the Michael Keaton Batman.
Yes.
And it was one of the certainly not the most, because I would make the argument Superman is the first modern comic book movie with Christopher Reeve, but there had been a lot of bad comic book stuff on TV, and after seeing Batman and how well it was done, I remember being very excited about them doing a TV show, and could they do it well? And I remember being very, very loyal to the series. And I will talk a little bit more of this. I felt like they did not they made it a little too mundane villains. I would have liked a little more for the modern turn meta. Have had more meta humans. It was the Flash normally just fighting regular crowd.
Well, that's kind of what happened in the last half of the season.
Yeah.
I think they were getting a lot of criticism because they weren't featuring those villains that people wanted to see.
Yeah.
But by that point, I think a lot of people had started checking out of the series.
Yeah. But I thought I was excited about it. I was very happy. Whatever night it was, this was something back then I did not tape on my VCR. This is something I watched live, and I was excited to see it. And
I did both, by the way.
Huh? Yes,
I did both.
Yeah, probably.
I definitely recorded this on my VHS. Yes.
Absolutely.
So Nick, how about you? What was your first exposure to watching this pilot?
Well, as you mentioned, Charles, I was 8 years old when this show came out. And it was one of the few shows that my sister and I did not fight over the remote for. Because, interestingly enough, my sister is not, now she's not the biggest superhero fan, what have you. But for some reason, her and I were able to settle our differences over The Flash. And because I'd already...
That was kind of a common ground you could find.
Her and I would just waited every single week for the episode to drop. And funny enough, this year was very special for our family because this was the year that my brother was born. He had been born in July, on the 3rd of July of 1990. And as I said, it was... I was already quite the Flash fan, and granted, it's the tender age of 8. What do you really know at that point? But I was kind of starting to read my first few comics.
But that's a great age to get hooked.
Flash. Because to take a page from Jesse's book, coming off of Batman 89 and rewatching it now with adult eyes and with a more critical eye, you can see they very much took from that because they're like, that is what folks are digging. They're digging the dark stuff. They're digging the Danny Elfman theme. They're digging and in fact, because if you notice, this TV show is incredibly Batman-ish in the way Central City is portrayed, crime is portrayed. So I think they very much took the Batman 89 as a template for this show. Not to mention, no surprise, they decided to have Danny Elfman do the score. And if you listen, I love the theme. It is uncannily similar to the 1989 Batman theme.
Well, and if you listen to the music of this, it's very reminiscent of, say, Batman the Animated Series, because the composer for the Flash TV series was Shirley Walker, who was the composer of Batman the Animated Series. So if you're wondering why it kind of sounds very, very similar to Batman, in addition to probably being intentional, it's also because of Shirley Walker, I'm guessing.
Well, that's good. I did not know that connection. That's nice.
Both Danny Elfman and Shirley Walker, I think, because obviously they collaborated on that. But I think it's also a signature thing, because it's like saying John Williams, for example. I don't want to go on too long of a tangent, but you do listen to the Indiana Jones theme and this is the Superman theme. They are kind of similar, but it's the signature of the composer, because they do have similar things. If you listen to it, if you break it down from a musical theory perspective, they are very, very similar because of the fact it's not criticism. It's simply because it comes from the same composer. So it's natural that there will be a similarity. But that's musical parentheses aside. This show meant the world to me. I still love it so much. I actually own the DVD. It's a traditional Hanukkah/Christmas tradition of mine to actually rewatch the entire season. And actually,
excellent.
And I just love it so much. What is curious, though, is how much it borrows from so many things. Because I mentioned it borrows from Batman 89, and it also borrows very much from the Wally West stuff. Because if you go and see this, we will get into it, but this Barry Allen is maybe more similar to Wally West than he is Barry Allen. That's the way I feel in certain aspects of his character. But before we get into too much into the weeds about it, I just love this series. It has a very special place in my heart. And, as I said, it's one of the few things my sister and I can agree on. And there's actually a funny anecdote. My
Yes.
sister and I would be watching to see when the next episode would drop, and my sister actually teased me once. She pretended there was an extra episode because she had seen a billboard go by. There's a store called Ephraim, and she said to
Okay.
me, "I've seen the preview to the next episode. It's Flash versus Ephraim." And I'm like, "It doesn't exist. How dare you say that?" And I was getting so worked up. I was like, "There's no such villain as Ephraim. What are you telling me?" Etc. And I found out later that she'd just seen a store name go by, and she was like, just deciding to pick on me and tell me that there was this secret.
Just to wind you up.
There was this secret episode of Flash versus Ephraim, and I was like, "Oh, man."
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
So as for me, of course, this is obviously a very big deal for me. I mean, no secret, right? I remember, when I first found out that they were having it, I was obviously very excited. And like you, I realized that probably the reason the show got on the air in the first place on CBS was because of Batman, 1989, because the movie was so hugely popular with that. And that's one of the things I'm going to talk about when we get to a trivia of how the show was developed. But yeah, it's obviously very heavily influenced by Batman. Just the look, the emphasis on shadows, the Danny Elfman theme, and then the Shirley Walker music. It's very reminiscent. The suit, the Flash suit worn by John Wesley Shipp. It's not spandex at all. It's very molded, like Michael Keaton's Batman suit in a lot of ways. And as a result, it may not be as flexible in the regard, but it obviously feels very heavily influenced. So it just permeated that. And, obviously I think Batman influenced a lot of other films like Dick Tracy and, some other films, like a lot of, especially a lot of some of the 90s TV movies that Marvel was making at the time. So, because it was just such a fresh spin, and I can very easily see CBS going like, look, Batman's popular. We need something like that on our network and try and get some younger viewers, because most CBS viewers are, let's face it, very, very old.
Yeah, especially back then, Charles. And just for context, in modern era, it is not unusual to have comic-based, TV shows. In fact, it's, often, I won't say it's majority, but it is definitely a healthy increase. I just did a quick search while you were talking because you mentioned Twin Peaks. Evening Shade. These are all shows that started in 1990. Evening Shade with Burt Reynolds, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
And nobody remembers that one.
Yeah. Law and Order, Beverly Hills 90210, Rugrats, which was a big player of my son. Yeah, Northern Exposure, Wings.
One of my favorites.
Yeah, Wings and Living Color and Blossom.
It was a great year for television.
Yeah, they were, but nothing close to The Flash. I mean, not anywhere close to, I guess Law and Order, but is crime fighting, and that's it. And that's how unusual they were going against the grain. And CBS was,
Well, it was a primetime superhero television show.
Yes.
So CBS was taking a very big risk because, normally it's like, well, network TV shows, doctors, lawyers, and and then doctors and more lawyers, really.
And the idea that you're using the
or
Flash,
cop shows.
You're not Superman. You're not Batman. You're not Spider-Man. This is the Flash. And for a comic book fan, absolutely, this is a great character. But it's kind of like when Marvel did Iron Man. As the start out, you're like, really? That's who your leadoff hitter is? And so, and when you think about it, and I can't wait to hear the trivia, but such a blessing we got this. We got one season. I would have loved more, but the idea that we got this and that, young Nick and you and I coming home from work, getting to see that is just a joy.
Yeah, it's obviously something, like I said, very near and dear to my heart. I mean, being a Flash fan of the comics, there was some things, and we'll talk about that the differences from the comics and the TV show, primarily because it borrowed a lot from the Wally West era in that regard. But yeah, it was just wonderful, and you could see CBS going like, well, it's a superhero, but he works for the police department, so they could like go, well, to probably to the investors or whatever, going, look, it's a cop show that just happens to be a superhero show.
True.
And I'm sure that's where a lot of the emphasis was.
And it's so funny, Charles, thinking here 30 years later, how commonplace, as even Jesse was saying, it is to have a superhero-themed TV show as in primetime TV. So I think in part we do maybe have to thank CBS for maybe being so forward-thinking to think that you could even have a superhero TV show airing in primetime. Because as I said, today, nobody kind of raises an eyebrow when, you have a Supergirl or a Batwoman or whatever on primetime TV. So I think these were very much, they blazed the trail for then it becoming status quo.
Keep in mind, let's put this in its proper context. So it's 1990. The only superhero TV show on the air at the time was Superboy, but that was in syndication. And before that, the last superhero TV show on television, especially primetime, was the Batman TV show back in the 60s. Or no, I stand corrected. It was the Incredible Hulk was the last one.
Or if you go further back, the George Reeves Superman.
And and you go back, but and also the short-lived Amazing Spider-Man show. But probably the Hulk was probably the
I
last.
would think so.
The probably the most recent, the closest to the Flash is what I'm saying.
In that time frame, yes.
Yeah. So it had been quite some time since a superhero show was placed on TV, and then the Hulk was a CBS show, if I recall correctly. So that kind of made sense that CBS would probably be the ones to try that again. Hey, we got 4 good seasons out of the Hulk, the Incredible Hulk, so let's try something else. And hey, this Batman thing is popular again. So what do we got? So trivia, since we're kind of already in that mode anyway, the development for this series began in 1988 when Warner Brothers Television, they were trying to develop TV films based on DC Comics characters for CBS. And Danny Bilson and Paul DeMeo came up with one that featured several superheroes, including the Flash, although their project wasn't made. And then in January 1990, probably after the success of Batman, new CBS Entertainment president Jeff Skaggs got really interested in creating a series based on the Flash. And they announced the show a few months later. And the role of Barry Allen was originally offered to Jack Coleman, who turned it down because he didn't want to wear tights and be involved in a superhero show. Now, Coleman, ironically enough, later goes on to play the role of Noah Bennett on NBC's Heroes. The 2-hour pilot, which we're talking about, cost $6 million. And keep in mind, that's 1990 money. So it was ridiculously expensive. And then each episode of the full season cost around $1.6 million to produce. So obviously it was an extremely expensive show, and that's one of the reasons why, with the ratings going down, CBS pulled the plug after only one season, because if it's not making you money, it's gone.
And it's costing you money.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, kind of like what happened, I guess, somewhat to Swamp Thing, I suppose, Charles, where the budget was just like way too high.
No, that's exactly what happened with that Swamp Thing TV series recently.
I miss it.
And just
it was good.
And to be that guy, because there are so many shows that have been taken off the air, it's not making them enough money. It is impossible to put a TV show on that doesn't make money. It just doesn't make you as much money.
Right.
And so, you're right, though, because it was at
it wasn't as cost effective.
Right, exactly, yes.
Yeah, unfortunately. Obviously now that I'm older, I can understand that somewhat, but when, back in 1990, I'm just like, you bastards, you canceled my favorite TV show. So...
You canceled Platypus Man.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry. Throwing a Simpsons reference.
That's all right. That's good.
Yeah, not the first or the last time Charles, Nick, and Jesse will be shaking their fist
Shaking your
at
fist.
Network TV.
Yes.
How dare you cancel
Networks!
Firefly?
Yeah.
Boy.
That's another one that got a lot of people upset, obviously. So the 4 Flash suits, if you're wondering, so the Flash costume for John Wesley Shipp, they made 4 of these, and they cost a total of $100,000. So $25,000 per suit. So
Nice.
think about that, cosplayers.
Yes.
Hope mom and dad will help you pay for those if you want to make one.
Call your local bank for a loan there.
Pretty much. You might have to rob a bank and turn supervillain to pay for your superhero suit.
I wonder how much, right? Because there was a lot of stuff that went into it, but it looked the same way. I wonder what a cosplayer how much they were into a 1990 Flash. How much would it cost them to make that? I would not think it would be. I mean, certainly.
Well, there's some very talented cosplayers that know how to do great stuff with cheap materials. So I mean, it might not look. They could probably do one that looks pretty close, which wouldn't cost nearly as much these days.
Charles, if you talk to our mutual friend Rachel, she knows all about that because she's gotten into costuming and everything else, so she knows all about that stuff.
All right. Well, maybe we need to bring Rachel
yes,
for,
we do.
For a consultant.
We do. We should do a cosplaying episode. That would be good. Yes.
I think that'd be a lot of fun. So Danny Elfman obviously composed the theme, and Shirley Walker composed each episode. We talked about that. Now, The Flash was originally scheduled to debut on CBS in the 8 p.m. Eastern Standard time slot on Thursdays to go up against The Cosby Show on NBC, which was insanely popular. And CBS obviously trying to attract younger viewers, because they had things like Murder, She Wrote and whatnot back on the day, so they had kind of, needless to say, a very older audience. But Fox ended up moving The Simpsons from Sunday to Thursday at the 8 p.m. slot as well. Mm-hmm. So essentially you would have had The Flash going up against both The Cosby Show and The Simpsons.
2 of the heaviest hitters in TV history.
Right, yeah, pretty much. And so, as a result, CBS moves the show to 8:30. But because it was an hour show, that was a really weird time slot for people. I don't know why they just didn't move it to 9. But
well, it seems, Charles, that folks don't know how to schedule things because,
like an hour show at 8:30 just blows people's minds.
Also, to open a brief parentheses, they did this. They made the same blunder with Doctor Who the movie, which was playing the same time that Roseanne was playing. Not a smart move to get for American audiences into Doctor Who. I'm just going to put that out there.
Yes, needless to say, yours truly has ranted about that a couple times on Next Stop Everywhere, as Jesse probably remembers.
And to even continue, right? J. Michael Straczynski talked about that the Sci-Fi Channel did a Babylon 5 spin-off movie, The Rangers. It was going to be a pilot.
Yes, the Legend of the Rangers.
And it was against football, and they pushed it against a football game, and he talks about.
Well, Sci-Fi is notorious for making bad decisions,
and he talked about it that when the game was over, their ratings shot up, so you could tell the audience was, oh, okay, now that the game's over, I'll go watch the second half of this, and I never understand the wisdom of network people that you don't take in context. And it goes all the way back to, not that this is our audience, but the Judy Garland show was against Bonanza, and they're like, wow, and why aren't she getting any ratings? And it's the boys of the Ponderosa were the big bads of that time. So they always try to counter program, and then when it doesn't work, they go, oh, it must have failed. Or maybe you just have this Goliath you're against, and nothing you put in there.
I think ego has a big part of it, because I think a lot of network suits think, well, this is a pretty big show. We're spending a lot of money on it, so it should be able to stack up against Cosby Show and The Simpsons, right?
It's bound to. And
then, so it's horrible, horrible thinking. And again, keep in mind, this is, again, 1990. they didn't know how to program a superhero show. They didn't know how to schedule that right. So obviously the ratings started trailing off on when it was on Thursdays, especially with that weird time slot.
Yes.
So then they ended up bumping it to Saturday nights, which, of course, kiss that show goodbye.
Yes, absolutely.
You might as well be on Friday nights at 10 in the Friday night death slot.
Because you notice now in modern
which is
day,
where they buried.
Yeah.
Which is what they did with Constantine on NBC.
Yeah, there are no new shows on Saturday nights anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, no network puts original programming. They either put, repeats or, sports during the different time. It is not something that they do because they know their viewers aren't there.
Yeah, and this is why you don't see a lot of DC or Marvel shows on network anymore.
Right.
DC's found a little bit of success on the CW, needless to say, but even that's starting to trail off.
Yeah.
Which is why the big shows that DC Comics and Warner Brothers are making are now going to HBO Max instead.
Well, yeah. So also there, the business model's completely changed, Charles, because now it's all on demand, so it's a whole different ball game. But yeah, of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and exactly. You bring up a great point. Is that because of streaming services and on demand that. This has affected a lot of shows. The ratings are way down. I was noticing that the Flash pilot got 22 million people watching.
Wow.
Which today would be insane.
Yes.
It was a big deal even then.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people tuned in this pilot. So, they were very excited about it. But again, it could have been even bigger had, with a proper, time slot.
Yeah.
All right. So that's all I got for trivia. I know it was a lot. Does anybody have anything else they want to add before we get started in our topics? I know we're just now getting started in the topics, but
yeah, it was already a long sort of hors d'oeuvre. It's kind of like a wedding menu where you have to take 5 hours for the hors d'oeuvres before you go to the main course.
Yeah. So. Well, maybe we won't take as long on the topic, but we're trying to. I know that time's important, so I'm going to try to get through this as efficiently as possible. I just thought there was some stuff that I wanted, I had to talk about.
Charles,
this.
You had to because we so much. This show is so important to so many people. So it's important.
I don't get the opportunity to talk about the Flash pilot much.
Exactamundo. So I totally get that. But yeah, I mean, personally, I don't have anything else. Jesse, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I've kind of done my rant about that. I'm excited to talk topics, and to be honest, Charles, you were not the only one that had hot takes to share on this. So
no, that's fine.
And we've only just begun.
Yeah, I know. Strap yourselves in, kids. We're going for a ride. Yeah. All right. So topic number 1: Mystery of the Human Thunderbolt.
Oh.
This is where I want to talk about the Flash, Barry Allen, our big superhero, played, of course, by the great John Wesley Shipp. And I thought we could also talk about the Allen family because we get to meet Barry's parents, Henry Allen, Nora Allen, and we also, interestingly, get to meet Barry's brother, Jay, who, like I said, was essentially a reworked version of Jay Garrick. Making him Barry's brother in this continuity, and then only to kill him off about 2/3 of the way through this pilot episode. And then I thought we could also talk about Julio Mendez, Barry's lab assistant in the Central City Crime Lab. But because Julio, I thought, obviously he goes on to be a major player on the TV series from this point on. So I thought I'd like to get your thoughts on his introduction as well. So, Jesse, since you're our returning co-host, why don't you share your thoughts on what you thought of John Wesley Shipp's debut as the Flash?
Well, as I mentioned, I have not revisited this pilot anytime recent, and I really enjoyed it, and I loved his performance. It is kind of interesting. They tried not to go the cliche family dynamics, the older, successful brother, but he didn't treat Barry as a jerk. I mean, he admired him. He said, hey, if I was smart like you, I'd be in a lab too. You know, like if you wanted to, they would have done that cliche like, oh, you're not a real policeman. Instead, they had a great relationship. Same thing about his father. His father, yes, was a jerk in a lot of ways, but in other ways, he was very supportive and like, no, Barry, you're all we have left now. I can't have you on the streets. So there was
I thought that was a poignant moment, by the way.
Yeah, I thought so too. There was real love there among the family. And yes, so it could have done this cliche of the older brother who doesn't like the younger brother, and the father,
like the sibling rivalry.
Yeah, and then you're disappointing. Like, why can't you be a real cop like your brother? There was a little bit of that, but not overly.
It wasn't between Barry and Jay.
Not at all. And so I like seeing that. We mentioned this a couple of times. I remember being thrilled that Barry had to eat a lot, because that was a new wrinkle that they had after Crisis, and we had Wally as the Flash. That was one of the traits that they'd brought up in the Flash comic, is that because he traveled so much, his metabolism just churned through food. And I went, and I remember telling Linda, like, oh, see, the reason he has to eat a lot is because his metabolism. That's just like the comic. And, Linda's looking at me like, as if I care. Yeah, there is a joke. Later, this was not available at the time, but yes, I read about that on the cover of Who Gives an F magazine, so I loved seeing that.
Thankfully, my wife is much more understanding with my geekiness in that regard, yes.
Well, Linda has to put up with Bruce Springsteen, so like she's like Bruce Springsteen.
So she's doubly damned.
Yes, she is. So I loved seeing him.
Funny.
I thought he felt like Barry Allen, and I loved the scene, because it looked like it was out of the comic with all the chemicals and everything. You're like, oh, that's, they're foreshadowing lightning. You know what that means? And, oh, he's going to the lab. He's going to the lab. I just loved the dynamics and seeing him, watching the growth of him as a hero. Originally I want to get rid of this, and later, okay, well, we can't have his parents being killed in a dark alley. What we'll do is we'll have his brother being killed in a dark, street to push him to be shades of Batman, as you mentioned. Okay, I've gone on.
It's a pretty big trope, yes, to have dead relatives being the motivation for superheroes. Like looking at you, Peter Parker.
There we go. All right, your turn, Nick.
Or Bruce Wayne. Yeah. So Nick. Now that we got Jesse giving his geekiness as a Silver Age fan, finally getting to see the Flash on TV, what was your reaction as a Flash fan yourself?
Well, first off, let me say, they're law-abiding people, the Allen family.
Nice. Very nice.
That said, I suppose, as that's right. Yeah, I can't snap my fingers, which is a terrible thing. I can't. I've tried, but Lord knows I can't. The Lord gave me other gifts, but not snapping my fingers. But it's interesting that Jesse brings up the point of you need the impetus to become a hero, because as we know in the actual comics, it's Nora Allen who dies, which gives, should we say, almost Barry the impetus to want to be a better person.
Something Jeff Johns introduced, so Flashpoint.
Yes, we didn't get, of course, Nora Allen. We got, of course, Jay dying. When it came to Barry Allen himself, at first, it depends on what day of the week I watch this, because there's some times where I find Barry is a bit of a jerk with people around him. As in, sometimes he mouths off, or he kind of is very demanding of people. I sometimes was not happy with the way he treated Julio in the early episodes, because it almost seems like he's like, you do this and do that and kind of thing. He doesn't seem very appreciative of what Julio does in some cases.
And that's the fault of the writers, I would say.
Yeah, in fact, because John Wesley Shipp does a fantastic job. It's the character of Barry who sometimes seems to get a little bit snappy sometimes. Sometimes he's a little bit impatient with people.
Now here you could kind of understand it a little bit, because he's just gotten his powers. and
Sure.
he's freaking out because he has no idea really how to control them until he meets Tina.
No,
So,
totally. But it's just like, but I mean,
and he's having problems with Iris, who's being really flighty
yeah,
and artsy fartsy.
And we will unload on Iris and then some.
Yes, we will. Yes.
As they say, I have opinions when it comes.
Well, we got a whole topic for you to
Miss,
rant about Iris.
To Miss West. But
yes.
The other curious thing is, I was mentioning how much Wally West bleeds into this Flash because Barry Allen in the comics is not a lover boy. Wally West is the lover boy. He's the social butterfly who has multiple girlfriends throughout the span of his run, whereas Barry tends to be almost a one-woman kind of guy.
Yeah.
And so
he's very loyal. He's very loyal to Iris.
Yeah, they kind of made him here. Wally West is kind of like the superhero Casanova, as we will see in the course of this series of this one season. That Barry is definitely a ladies' man, or rather, he tends to attract the female sex more often than not. And but aside from that, I really love the character. He grows into the fact of wanting to do the right thing and wanting to almost, I don't know whether it's he wants to impress his father in some way and prove himself to his dad, aside, of course, from wanting to avenge Jay's death. Also, the dynamic within the Allen family, it kind of reminds me a little bit of how Denethor treats Boromir and Faramir, because Denethor is very much about Boromir's my man, he's the best guy in the world. Faramir is kind of like, chopped liver. And it almost seems to me like he tends to be that way with Jay and Barry. Jay almost seems to be more of the favorite son compared to Barry.
Right.
Granted,
at least as far as Henry's concerned.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is...
I don't think Nora plays favorites, but I think Henry does.
No, Nora I think she loves her sons equally. I think Henry, it takes Jay's death to appreciate Barry. Because
I think you're right.
Because before that, he's all about, Jay's my man, he's a cop just like his old man. Whereas
he's a real cop.
Yeah, whereas Barry's, dresses in a lab coat and analyzes fingerprints. At least that's the way that Henry looks at it.
Well, he kind of does this backhanded compliment. He's like, well, the lab guys are important, but it's real cops like Jay who get the job done.
Yeah.
That's where I got the whole...
A gun, a badge, and a prayer, and it's funny because you had both Barry and Jay making fun of him saying this.
Yes, they did. That was a really
because they've heard it for years, probably.
Yes.
It's definitely like a mantra that he lives by.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, I loved it. I mean, granted, as I said, being such a huge fan of the character, I was very happy with this Barry. And it just seems to me that from time and again, he seemed a little bit snappy and impatient with people. Because there are times when he is, also with Tina, sometimes he's not as kind or as nice as he could be. He's like, I'm going to do this, screw you, I'm going to do this. So he seems very impatient. But then again, it's almost the trait of a speedster to be impatient and not want to wait.
I think you mean impulsive, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly.
See
Impulse.
See what I did there? Yeah.
Nice.
One thing I really loved, which, by the way, I meant to say, I thought Thunderbolt was going to be in Stargirl next season. Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. Your topic. Yes.
Yeah. There's a reason for that.
Yes.
Maybe Nick knows it.
Yes, it is. I'm suspecting it. I also love before he gets his powers, you see Barry in a lot of red. He wears a red shirt. He's got some red pants. He's, I think that was kind of a nice thing. And then once he has the powers, they switched away from that. But before, I thought that was a really nice, kind
foreshadowing.
of like, like you often see Luthor like in purple a lot, like on Smallville, you would see Michael Rosenbaum. So really cool. I think great points.
Or Clark wearing red jackets, and blue T-shirts, that kind of thing on Smallville.
Yes.
Yeah. So, John Wesley Shipp, for me, I didn't really see him as being constantly irritable. I saw him being occasionally irritable, but I think John Wesley Shipp, right from the start, I think he strikes me as just, he's Barry Allen. He does a great job, I think, of and it's a very different Barry Allen from what we see in the comics. Especially pre-crisis, Barry Allen was written as a very standard superhero. There wasn't a lot of nuance to him, which is one of the reasons I think that Bilson and DeMeo tried to incorporate the post-crisis Flash, Wally West, the third Flash, and bring in a lot of his character traits into Barry to try to make him more modern, more relatable to an 80s audience, or late 80s, 90s audience. And so consequently, this is why you see things like, the increased metabolism that Mike Baron introduced in his early Flash issues featuring Wally West, starring Wally West. So, and then the kind of the playboy a little bit, because Wally in Baron's run was very much a playboy, and I'm sure probably some of the network suits were like, well, hey, why does Barry have to be tied down to one woman? So let's have him play the field. Yeah. And so that's why I think they wrote out Iris out of this, from this point on, because they do kind of reconcile in this pilot, and then all of a sudden she's gone by the second episode.
It's very weird, Charles, though. Let's be honest, it's very weird. And also, to your point, sorry to interrupt you there. The other thing I wanted to actually say was, also if you look at the build, because I believe Wally West is more muscular compared to the artwork that was done for the Flash and Barry Allen, who tend to have more the body of a runner, which tends to be not as muscle bound, but has the right degree, shall we say, of muscle mass to where you're light but fast. Whereas this Barry is much more, shall we say, muscular, which is, if you look at the artwork for Wally West, he's
a little more broad-shouldered. Yeah,
Wally West tends to be more muscle-bound than Barry Allen in the comics, at least in the artwork.
In the early ones, especially when it was drawn by Butch Guice.
Yes.
Yeah, he was.
He had the body of a runner as Barry Allen. essentially, you look at they're not weightlifters, because you have to be light in order to run fast.
Yeah, but again, you got to look like you can fill out the suit. And to John Wesley Shipp's credit, he looks like he could fill out that suit. When you had Michael Keaton and Batman wearing his suit, obviously there was a lot of padded muscles.
Oh, sure.
But
here
with John Wesley,
it's pure
Shipp. That's pure Shipp, exactly. That's all Shipp, right? So he doesn't have to.
The man is seriously ripped. I'd forgotten how ripped he was. I was like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, you like when he's on the treadmill, and I'm sure that was a lot of eye candy for a lot of
I'm sure.
a lot of ladies and probably a few gentlemen as well in that regard. So, but yeah, I find he's a very wholesome character. This Barry, he's trying to he wants to fight crime, but he's doing it in his own way as Barry, and his father can't see that. His father is very much old school cop. He's we find out, he was a former cop. So it's essentially a cop family, that's probably gone down through the generations. Yeah. And so consequently, Henry sees Jay as the ideal son because he's the traditional cop. Now, to Jay's credit, though, I'll get you to Jesse. Don't worry. I'm not trying to cut you off. I promise. But to Jay's credit, he doesn't try to live up to his father's favorite son standard. He's very sympathetic toward Barry, as we see in this early on. He's when Barry gets frustrated, he goes outside after getting the page to go to a crime scene. Jay follows him outside. He's like, look, it's the old man blowing hot air. Just ignore him. And so you kind of see where Barry and Jay were very supportive of one another in a lot of ways, probably, dealing with their old man's attitudes toward police work, especially in the modern day. So they probably relied a lot on each other. And I really liked that relationship they had. For not having Barry not having a brother in the comics, I thought it worked pretty well in this pilot.
Just like Boromir and Faramir.
Yeah. So Jesse, go on.
Yeah,
I
no,
know you've
I,
been
I, I totally agree.
eager.
And, what's also kind of nice is we don't watch it anymore, but for the first 3 or 4 seasons, Linda and I watched Blue Bloods, the Tom Selleck cop show.
Yeah.
And one of the staples is on Sundays, they had Sunday dinner, the whole family together. And this you could see, not just because it was a birthday, but you could tell they do this fairly often, right? Like they get together. Iris is very comfortable there. They all know Iris. This is a family dynamic that they do. And absolutely, I thought the moment where he gives him his old medal, right? And like, hey, where did that come from? Well, I borrowed it years ago.
Yeah.
And like, well, what else do you have in mind? Well, wait till Christmas, right? Was a kind of nice line. I totally agree.
I think they had a good relationship.
And once again, if I'm going to Monday morning quarterback or 20 year later edit, I probably would have not killed off the brother and had the dynamic of him not knowing, Barry is the Flash, and kept.
And then he finds out later.
Yeah, maybe, and have that kind of, that closeness together as brotherhood, but then it causing a strain because the brother being skeptical of this vigilante. I love their friendship together, and I think, and it was really nice, and I also, and I know this is kind of not what we're talking about, but did either of you see things and go, wow, this was an influence on the modern Flash? Because things that got right, they embraced and doubled down, and things that they feel like, oh, we could have improved on that. I really do feel like this is I just saw a lot of like, oh, okay, that's why they don't do that or stuff. It just was really lovely to see.
Yeah, I think the 2014 show learned a lot from the 1990 show's mistakes.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially in getting the villains out there right from the start.
I agree. Yes.
Oh, yes.
So not just making it about like, oh, we got to fight a biker gang.
Yeah.
So which is a very tame threat for the Flash, especially knowing his skill set and his power set.
Well, maybe it could be because of the 90s, the whole thing about street crime was a big deal in the States, I'm thinking. Right. So it could also be that. And also being, should we say, inspired by 89's Batman, it's all about petty crime, if you will, and cities being so devastated. Because I believe if this is like fashioned almost after New York City, from what I was told, New York City was an incredibly dangerous place to go in the 90s. So I'm thinking that is what they're almost tributing is crime-ridden cities were maybe the big deal and the thing that everybody talked about then. I mean, I'm just spitballing here, Charles, but that's maybe where they're coming from. Maybe
for me personally, it wasn't until like Mark Hamill shows up as the trickster.
Yeah.
Where the show really started finding its way.
Well,
I agree.
And I think, Charles, you brought up a really good point that, your showrunner, and the networks are, okay, but it's going to be a police show, right? Like, I understand he's got a red
like they view
suit,
it as a cop show.
Like, but this is, yes, it's a cop show. It's going to be, we're going to do, we're going to be fighting regular criminals, and he's going to be doing that. Okay. Well, it's a cop show, but the little twist is that he can run fast. Okay, I can live with that. And so you wonder how much they were kind of, their hands were tied on how
because of the network suits. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, I agree. No, I really. So what did everybody make? Once Barry's finally in the suit, and he's acting as the Flash. He's doing the super speed tricks, and obviously this is years before proper CGI.
Mm-hmm.
So we're dealing with 1990 special effects, which are obviously very limited compared to today.
Cool.
So what was it? Taking that into context? I thought they did a great job back then.
It still holds up today, Charles. To be honest, I don't find it hokey or like, if I go and watch certain movies which had bigger budgets than this, the special effects are god awful.
Like Spawn?
Yes, in fact, I mean, I hate to constantly go to Spawn, but yes, you have read my mind. But,
yeah.
But I don't think the speed effects were that cringeworthy, to be honest. I mean, I still bought them today. I mean, granted, it doesn't take a lot to impress me, but at the same time, it doesn't look weird. It doesn't look jarring. You still buy into it. The physics and stuff I think, are more than serviceable, for a 90s TV show. Kudos to, I mean, compared to even Justice League's Flash, where he is skating, for crying out loud. And it's so weird at the end of the Justice, because the effects are great up until the end. At the end, you see Flash
but he's
skating.
like, la la la, yeah.
He's like, what are you, seriously? I mean, come on.
With Ezra Miller's weird running style.
Yes,
he's a speed skater.
And
have you become Miss Kwan or something? Kind of just skating to the cold. It was terrible. This is serviceable.
Yeah, and
Brian Boitano, perhaps.
Yeah, one of the scenes that I really enjoyed, I remember liking it originally, and then this time again, is him cleaning up the apartment when he sees that she's
That's a very funny
come.
scene.
And then, because he can't quite control his powers, he ends up creating a bigger mess in a lot of ways, a different kind of mess. And I was like, okay, that's kind of funny, right? Because he's all worried about Iris seeing that he was looking like a pig, and then to see him now it looked, and then blaming the dog, which is so sad.
Earl,
Earl.
I felt bad for Earl in this because he's. There's that great moment where Barry discovers his powers for the first time when he's out walking Earl, his dog, in the park, and Earl chases off after a baseball, and Barry starts running after him, trying to keep up with the leash, and then the speed kicks in, and he runs right past Earl, and then crashes into the bushes. But Earl is like traumatized by this whole thing.
Yes.
So that every time Barry uses his powers, Earl's like heading right to the closet, grabbing a very convenient sock or something that's tied to the door, and pulling the closet door shut.
Yes, I thought that was very clever. That was.
I actually also wanted to point out, what did you guys make of the other effect that we get of Barry traveling, where you have the camera almost in first person?
I love that.
Seeing chasing through the streets. Did you guys like that?
Yeah, I mean, because the point of view shot is what you're talking about, right? Where it looks like you're looking shots, through his eyes, running down the streets, and you're like swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Yeah. I mean, I thought that was great because, again, you're dealing with 90s special effects, so you have to convey that speed somehow. And I thought the POV shot, which is essentially just like, taking footage, driving down a road, and then speeding it up really fast. And then, with quick cuts and whatnot, was very effective in conveying that sense of speed. I thought it was really well done.
And it became very iconic with the show throughout this season, I think.
Yeah, it was good. It was great. Any thoughts on Julio from anybody? The introduction of Barry's lab partner is. Go ahead.
As I said, Charles, I think he gets a little bit mistreated by Barry sometimes. I think Barry sometimes underestimates his intelligence, to be honest. I mean, granted, okay, Julio is his assistant, so possibly he doesn't, I don't know whether he's got a degree or not, or he's just kind of an intern, if you will. But it seems like sometimes Barry treats him a little bit with kind of, he's like, you do this, you do that, and all this kind of thing. And so,
if he's like the senior, maybe he's the senior chemist and Julio is the junior.
Yeah.
So maybe he just delegates a lot of stuff. So like Barry's in charge of the department, perhaps.
Yeah, it's just that, granted, their friendship grows throughout the season. But at first, it seems like, as I said, he maybe is a little bit snappy with him. Granted, sometimes Julio tends to be a little bit lazy. Sometimes, he's kind of goofing off or falling asleep, behind the microscope, right, or all this kind of thing. But it's a nice dynamic because then, of course, they then develop a friendship, and you can see the seeds of this friendship, which will be a big point in the series. And Mr. Desert does a fantastic job of it. I really enjoy this character. He's one of my favorite kind of, should we say, ancillary characters in this series.
Yeah, I like when Julio was calling out Linda Park when they're
Yeah, I want to talk to a cop. I'm a cop.
yeah, like they're looking for like a real police detective, and he shoots back. Well, I'm looking for a real reporter, and I like that he was standing up for their crime lab a little bit, the CSI guys, because that's essentially what Barry was doing back then with CSI work.
Yeah, and he's the sidekick, and once again to point out, Cisco and the other, in the modern era are much more than just the trusty sidekick, right? That is
because they have their own powers.
Yeah, and well, even before he had the powers, there was a fully fleshed character. This one is a little, and you could just see that. That is because he is he's the sidekick, and he's kind of there. And I do think if the series had lasted longer, they would have done a little bit more with it. But yeah, certainly an interesting character that we would have liked to see more of.
Yeah, they did give him like a girlfriend later on.
Yes, later down the line, who is always trying to get Barry, find girlfriends for Barry, which is fun.
Yeah.
Very matchmaker.
So they could be like double date or whatever. Yeah.
And I'm actually glad, Charles, that being the 90s...
And he does get invited. Oh, he does get invited to the Allen dinner at the end of the episode,
which I was so glad about, because I was worried seeing it in the concept of 90s TV. He wasn't the token black guy, which they could have easily been, being 90s TV, maybe not being as enlightened, if you will.
Yeah.
And it tended to almost be the case that on an all-white TV show, you'd have the token black guy who's the friend of the superhero. And I'm glad they didn't fall into that trap, which they could have easily have done in the 90s.
Yeah. Well, they noticed they had a black police chief on the show.
That's why I was so glad when we saw that. It's like...
It was a little more progressive, so that's good. That was a big deal back then, right? All right. So let's move on. Topic number 2. Let's talk about, and I know Nick is ready for this. Let's talk about Tina. And let's talk about Iris. So in a double dose of danger. So Tina and Iris, two different women, but both giving Barry some complications in his life. So Tina, essentially we should probably start with Iris first, because when we start off this pilot, Barry is involved with Iris. They're dating. Barry apparently wants to move things forward. He's willing to propose to her. He's willing to commit to her. But Iris, being flaky artist chick in this version, instead of the, news reporter for the Central City Picture News that we see Candace Patton on, as on the 2014 show and then also in the comics. That she's a much more less committal, shall we say, and is not willing to get into that relationship. So that kind of creates some friction between them. Mm-hmm. So what's everybody's take on Iris first? So Nick, we'll start with you first, since you're ready to talk Iris.
Okay. First, I want to know what in the world was going through the writers' heads when they wrote this character, because... Are you giving us like Brenda Walsh meets goth chick? Because what is this? I mean, because she's got the kind of beret artsy-fartsy thing going on, but at the same time, she is almost like super goth at the same time. I'm like, what are you doing? Is this Charmed meet...
Well, she wasn't really wearing black, so I don't think she was super goth. She
kind of had that goth kind of thing going on. I don't know. So it almost seemed like Charmed meets Beverly Hills 90210 kind of thing.
That makes more sense, yeah. That's a good comparison.
I was like, what is with this girl? I mean... I love the Iris West from the comics. I mean, she is supposed to be kind of like the Lois Lane to Superman, if you will.
Yeah.
And I could not stand this woman, because first she's like, oh no, we can't get married. What are you saying? I'm leaving. And off she goes. And he's like, oh, I thought about it. I love you. Let's get back together again. I'm like, seriously, girl, she is the character I have the most trouble with, and I have to be honest, I did not miss her when we find out that she has mysteriously moved to Paris and is writing to Barry from Paris. It's like, okay.
Au revoir. See you later.
Exactly. So I had a lot of problems with her. I think Barry, you're a great guy. You can do better, and you will do better for sure. And
Exactly.
I just was not a fan of this girl at all. She seems like sympathy zero. The character is like very, I could almost, to move on to Tina, I could see much more of a sexual tension between him and Tina, which granted in an alternate universe gets realized, if you will, but never really on the Flash because they're kind of like, let's just be friends, but there is that sexual tension. I could see the two characters much more on the level when it came to Tina and Barry compared to Barry and Iris. Because Iris seemed to me to be a total airhead and they just should be dating. She should be dating Pike. She shouldn't be dating Barry.
Ooh, that's harsh. That's harsh.
But yeah, I'm just messing. But yes, I on the other side, Tina McGee, I adore this woman. I wish Tina McGee were my next door neighbor because she's just so kind, so engrossed in her work, so passionate about what she does, and she's so empathetic because she sees her husband in Barry. That's the whole thing that drives this pilot.
That died.
Yeah.
But they kind of she sees a little bit more of, the kind of person that he was. And so maybe she has a type, perhaps, and maybe Barry's that type.
Which could explain her attraction, because you can tell they're clearly attracted to each other. They're almost those awkward moments where you think, will they, won't they, kind of thing throughout the course of even this episode. But she's such a beautiful character, genius-level woman, really engrossed in wanting to help Barry out. And let's be honest, if Barry listened to her, he'd be doing way better. He wouldn't have, been in all the crazy things. Listen to your women, folks, because they know what they're talking about. That was one of the things why I kind of got on my nerves a little bit about Barry. He's like, oh, no, I'm not going to listen to you. You think I'm your husband. I'm out of here. I'm going to do it my way. And you do it your way, and you get screwed. So that's what kind of irked me. But yes, Tina McGee, wonderful. Iris, glad you're no longer on the show. That's all I'm going to say, Charles.
Well, gee, if there's any criticism I have of Nick, is that he always holds back about his opinions.
Yes.
I mean, geez, maybe you should try sharing a little more, Nick. I don't know. Maybe that might work. All right.
Well, see, you brought that out in me today, Charles. There you go.
Well, I've been known to speak my mind once or twice, maybe.
Absolutely.
I might express some opinions. Jesse, how about you? What are your thoughts on Iris in this episode, and also Tina going forward?
So I have to confess that I cannot. I may be biased in my evaluation because I just love the actress so much. So it was a surprise. So from my perspective, I like the idea that Barry, cop, scientist, very straight-laced, going with the opposite attracts, someone very artist, someone very kind of a little bit out there, maybe a little younger than him. Yeah. And so I like that dynamic. I think she's very, with the exception of the fact of wanting to get married, and that's because she's still young and she's into that kind of, hey, I'm this rebel.
I'm only 25.
I'm this rebel and I'm, kind of doing things out there. And I do think that it's very realistic to, he did miss her art show, which was, she says, I know you're not that supportive of my art, but I thought you'd at least show up, so there is some underlying tension there that, so I didn't have a problem with that. And I do understand maybe because, the romantic dynamics of her saying, okay, maybe this isn't working out, and then coming back and going, you know what, I'm more miserable without you than I am with you. So if we need to get married, let's do that. And then he's decided. I think what they were hoping to do is set up a very two opposite someone, very emotional, artistic, very feeling based, and then the other half, someone very intelligent, very factual, very in her own way cold. And I don't mean cold as unfeeling, just
scientific.
Yeah, scientific and logical and emotional. That,
so you think they were going a love triangle?
Yes,
route?
I do. I think they were going to do that. And then they decided, no, we don't need that. Let's just have, we don't need that complication. Let's just have, Tina and we have Barry, and we'll kind of work through that. And the dynamic will be, will they or won't they? So I have no problem. But like I said, part of that is because I am a huge Paula Marshall fan.
So you're biased.
Yeah.
Yes.
In fact, quick note, a really good friend of mine went to high school with Rob Thomas from Veronica Mars and Fame, and he said, "Hey Rob, Jesse is a huge fan. Can I give him his email address?" And absolutely. So I emailed him, and I do not have it anymore. And I just, how much I love the show, I loved and everything. And he said, "Well, I'm going to lunch with Paula Marshall. I will tell her you are a fan." And I want to go, really? Oh. So it's hard for me. I get what you're saying, Nick, but for me, it worked. It worked a lot. Tina, I love the way that she's overprotective. I do see that she doesn't want this repeated. I would have – sometimes you go with, do we want that, will they or won't they? And sometimes it's just kind of nice to see them not ever going to that romantic mode. But I thought this was worked, and I do think that if I remember the series enough, I always liked them together. I do think they have good chemistry, and and it was probably smart to get rid of the love triangle. I think that was a smart move. Just for this one, though, it was really great to see Paula in that, and then Tina is just, there's nothing wrong with that character, and I totally agree with Nick as far as. Barry has a little bit of stubbornness in him, a male chauvinism maybe, like you can't tell me what to do, I know better, and and I think that's a fun dynamic too. I absolutely agree with Nick. Like if you just had listened to her, you would be in so much better shape.
Well, I think one of the things that's interesting about Barry and Tina's relationship is that they're both kind of stubborn. Yeah. If you notice, they're both very headstrong in a lot of ways. So consequently, they each, especially in this pilot, I think that softens over time. But in this pilot especially, they each think they know what's best, especially regarding the other. And so they're not as sensitive as, neither one I think is as sensitive as they could have been in this episode. Iris, I was pretty, as obviously coming from a big Flash comics background, Iris, the depiction of Iris was one of the things that disappointed me most about this series. Because if you're a longtime Flash fan, you know that Barry Allen and Iris West belong together.
Yep.
It's like Lois Lane and Clark Kent, or Peter Parker and Mary Jane Watson. They belong together. And so to have this version of Iris, and again, not being a news reporter, and I can get why they wanted to kind of change it up because, so that she doesn't come off like a Lois Lane clone. But by the same token, I think, making her this artistic, flighty, non-committal person that hasn't quite figured out what she wants out of life. I don't know if they had any long-term plans for her, but if they did, I could see why they changed it, because the idea that this particular version of Iris and Barry being together, it doesn't quite work. I know it's not really in an opposites attract kind of way either. It's just more that Iris doesn't want to commit to the relationship, but Barry does. It's kind of a very one-sided relationship. Yeah. And Barry may struggle. He may screw up, like where he loses control of his speed and ends up on the beach and passing out and missing Iris's art gallery showing. But again, he's just now discovering his powers. That wasn't entirely his fault. So it's not like he didn't intend to be there. I mean, that's one of the reasons why, he tried to make that gallery and raced for the bus, shot past it, and ended up on the beach because of trying to make that art gallery opening. So it's just, it just didn't happen. So I think Barry is more involved in their relationship than Iris is. And as a result, I don't think it works. So then when Tina comes along, Tina and Barry have a lot in common. They both have that science background. And there's a great moment where in the pilot where Tina is interviewing Barry, and Barry, she asks him, so what kind of chemicals were involved in this lightning strike? And he just okay, well, top shelf, there was this, 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 and this. And second shelf, there was this, this. And she's sitting there impressed, you know all that. And he goes, yeah, of course. So I think this is the first time she's actually impressed by his intelligence. And maybe becomes a little bit unwitting, maybe not, subconsciously attracted to him at this point going forward. And, she's, as we saw in the TV series when it fully forms, that, she's the girl in the van helping out, kind of like the Cisco role, and being the support for the superhero. She's the one that treats his wounds, helps him figure out when his powers go wonky and whatnot. And you notice that Barry becomes very reliant on her, especially regarding his powers, because interestingly enough in this pilot, Barry's powers, he has these feigning spells, which thankfully they dropped when the series happened with episode 2 going forward. You notice that's quickly forgotten. It only really happens in this pilot, but it makes Barry more vulnerable and dependent on her. And it's a good way to have them interacting in a lot of ways. And I think John Wesley Shipp and Amanda Pace have really great chemistry with one another.
I agree.
And I think that's one of the foundations, and that's a very important foundation for a series. If you don't buy that your two leads have great chemistry with one another, why would you want to watch this series?
Absolutely.
All right. Anything else about Tina and Iris?
I just wanted to add one thing, Charles. Granted, she's not in this pilot, but they were nearer the mark with the Iris West character when another character arrived later on, a certain Miss Lockhart.
Megan
Lockhart, played by the beautiful Joyce Heiser. And she is way nearer the mark to what Iris West is, and she is a perfect companion for Barry because she understands him. She's got it's another different kind of way of thinking. And this is the character we should have had from the get-go. We should have had Megan Lockhart from the get-go. Also, I look at it in this way. Iris is a beautiful woman. She's gorgeous, etc. But I often think to myself, after sex, what would the two of them talk about? Nothing. They have zero in common. Whereas with Megan, you could see them having these very interesting conversations. I mean, I know this is just my
Well, apparently they like pay-per-view boxing because they were in a very funny moment where
there was.
It would have lasted longer, kind of thing.
That.
And you're
playing up the joke that the Flash would be really quick in bed, apparently.
Well, because this is the first time they had been together since he had the powers, right? So that was I thought very clever. Once again, I think the idea that he could be interested in hearing her talk about art and what she's going on, and she could hear them. As someone who's been married 35 years, a few years ago, Linda said, you're talking about something I don't care about. And I go, that's the secret to our marriage, is that we listen to each other talk about things that we don't care and the other one doesn't care about. Linda's like, fair enough. That's true. That is one of the secrets to our marriage. So that's why I think that would have worked fine.
Okay. Well, Nick, I'm so glad you brought up Megan Lockhart because as far as I'm concerned, that was the great relationship that never was on this show. That was... those two, Joyce Heiser and John Wesley Shipp, had such great chemistry. And I think it would have been a lot more interesting had, like you said, Megan been around from the start. And there would have been a triangle perhaps between Tina, Megan, and Barry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And even in that wonderful episode where he actually calls her Lady Flash, that kind of made me kind of smile when it came to Megan Lockhart. Because, we should think of a name for you. How about Lady Flash? So... Yes, Megan Lockhart, you are very much missed to this day, for sure.
Joyce Heiser was a great character.
She was fantastic.
Played a great character, yeah.
Yeah, put in maybe a little too late, but yeah.
At least we got her in a couple episodes.
Yeah.
Topic number 3. Let's move on. Let's talk about our big bads. Nicholas Pike, played, like I said, by Michael Nader. Lila and the Dark Riders in a segment I'm going to call Danger on Wheels. So we had Mystery of the Human Thunderbolt, Double Dose of Danger, and Danger on Wheels. So anybody want to take a guess at the theme here? Anyone? So no guesses. These are all titles of Barry Allen Flash comic stories.
Ah, very nice.
And particularly Mystery of the Human Thunderbolt, which was the title from Barry's first appearance in Showcase number 4 back in 1956. So
I should have known that.
That's all right. I'm glad I stumped you. Yay.
Yeah, very nice. Yes.
All right. So Jesse, we'll start with you first. What did you think of Pike as the pilot's big bad and the treacherous Lila and the Dark Rider biker gang?
So you're only as good as your villain, and they weren't very good villains. If there was any disappointment in this pilot, it was I was bored when I saw the villains on screen. The whole idea of him being an ex-cop, and I just didn't get his motivation. I was shocked, and to see her smoking in the interrogation room.
Yeah.
Went, whoa, does this date this show or what? Right? That
yes, it's 90s. You got to smoke back then.
Yes.
Smoke them if you got them.
Yeah. She was.
Right, Nick?
Yeah.
Yay.
Yes. They weren't a very complex or interesting villain. So, and I mean, it was, and once again, as we criticize this, right, this is what it was they had to do to get the show on. But I would have liked to seen a little more complex, less kind of cartoon villain. That's my initial thoughts.
Yep. Okay. Nick, how about you? What are your thoughts on Pike and the Dark Riders?
Well, you know what,
or Delilah?
You know what, I can see why we didn't get a Captain Cold or Mirror Master or what have you from the get-go, because it might have been too much for a Flash so early into his powers. As in, you wanted to give him something street level, once again kind of paying homage to the 89 Batman where your criminals are street level thugs. And so, and I guess...
And then build up from there.
That's what I thought was the impetus, and the idea was they'll get bigger and bigger as time progresses, as things progress. So my thought was probably that, and also I suppose in the 90s biker gangs were the thing. I don't know. As I said, I didn't live in America in the 90s, so I can't say. But if TV and movies have taught me anything, it seemed like in the 90s all the bad guys were on bikes and had this is terrible. It gave metalheads a bad name, because these guys are evidently metalheads with the long hair and stuff, because like, long-haired folks don't have jobs, right. They're criminals, they're bad people, and they listen to crap music. That was, I think, the stereotype at the time. And, I say this is a proud metalhead back in the day. So that was the impression I got.
They're like hanging out in some like abandoned water plant or something. Yeah, or sewer plant. Yeah.
So it's kind of like the people with the long hair don't have jobs. Keep your hair short, son. Apple pie and all that good stuff. But no, I think it was mainly for the fact of the Flash is so early into his powers, you can't give him, like I said, the Captain Colds, the Mirror Masters, and what have you. So it kind of stood to reason, or not to mention you kind of brought in the whole fact of Pike being his brother's ex-partner, and so wanting to make it very much a family affair and a very personal affair. So I can totally see that. And you know what? I didn't mind. I mean, the crazy thing is Pike will return in other episodes, which is really strange.
Yeah, he shows up in one more episode in the season. So this isn't the last we see of Pike.
Yeah, and also there's the alternate. Yeah, because there's the alternate universe where he becomes like the king of the city and the dictator. So, but I thought it was a decent villain, and heck, at a certain point. We see that Barry kind of has one of his crazy kind of head spins and is actually almost beaten pretty hard by Pike with his steel pipe. And you're thinking to
Right.
yourself,
That was the only way they could make that fair, is
yeah.
to have him have that kind of vertigo effect or whatever, where he's about to pass out, and make him vulnerable for Pike to actually land a shot in.
Yeah, that's right. So it was that I think that's why they wanted to go with the street level thing, because taking from Batman and what have you. So he's a serviceable villain for this pilot. But yeah, and actually I had a question for you guys: is how does Jay exactly die? Because is he like kind of beaten to death off screen? Because we see him fall to the ground and roll down, so he couldn't have died from that.
Well, you notice when there was the shot where, Pike was coming at him with the motorcycle.
Yeah, and then because he
gets off and he starts going down to the ravine or whatever that Jay had fallen into.
Yeah, so we're assuming that Pike has beaten him since. Yeah.
And it's off screen because, again, this is network TV in the 90s, so they probably couldn't get away with showing that violence, at least not on CBS.
Sure.
They got away with it on Twin Peaks on ABC.
But
Go figure. But they didn't on CBS. So probably their networks guy, standards and practices guys, probably it's like, okay, if you're going to kill him, you're going to have to show it off screen.
Yeah.
And that's probably what happened there.
Yes, that was pretty much my kind of.
So Barry has to show up and is like, oh, my brother's dead. Pike.
Yeah, we actually got that scene. That moment.
No.
We actually got that trope where he kind of screams, cradling his brother in his arms.
Yeah.
But yeah, and when it came to, shall we say, Pike's girlfriend, if you will, she's she's on par with Iris West, because she's like so flighty. I mean, come on. She's like with this one guy who's eating steak, like, oh, we're going to get out of here. And then she goes off, and just to make Pike happy, she tells him, oh, this guy is trying to, steal your money.
On him. Yeah.
Lila
rats on him.
That is terrible. And that's what I'm saying. She's kind of on par with Iris West. But yeah, she's awful. And she is, but she's very much your kind of stereotypical biker babe girl, if you will, who's kind of like the boss's babe, who is all about following him because he's got like this messianic view of, I will follow him because he's my messiah and he's my hero, and doesn't really think for herself. She's all about, this guy will rule the city, and girl, you have to
Well, I think with Pike, and this is, they set him up as kind of like, it's not just a biker gang, it's almost like a cult. Really.
Yeah,
yes,
that's why I say it's almost like a messianic figure.
Yeah, and so consequently, Lila, I think, she's got her boyfriend Rick, and Rick wants to just get the hell out of Dodge. Like, look, I pocketed $300. Let's just get out of here.
Yeah.
And she turns around, rats on him to Pike, who's like, okay, well, this guy kept money that should have been mine, so I got to make an example for him, and I'm going to do this thing where he gets drawn and quartered, or no, that he gets strapped to a motorcycle with a grenade or something, and they ship him off.
Yeah.
So waste of a good bike, in my opinion.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, it's the whole symbolism of the thing, and to keep the troops in line. And so I think Lila is just more ambitious, because she sees like, okay, my current boyfriend's a loser. This Pike guy looks like he's got something going on, and he's got this huge following. Maybe I'm going to throw in with him.
Could we call her a biker gold digger?
Pretty much. I think that's fair. Yeah, I think, or just, that she's just, that cult, that she's just totally into the cult thing and is buying into whatever mystique she thinks Pike has.
Yeah, because he's like her Jesus, her David Koresh, what have you. He's that character. Her Charles Manson, whatever you want to put out there. And he could not care less, because we see literally almost leaves her to die in the prison. Because when the tear gas comes through the vents, it's like,
and she's
nice
all like, "How could you curse your inevitable betrayal?"
Yes. So it was like, come on, really? But yeah, there you go. false idol. That's what you happen. That's what happens when you worship false idols, folks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also love her skimpy clothes, right? And they make jokes about you're going to be cold in here, or the other thing. Yeah, she's not a very developed character. Though I like I said, I don't think the villains are that much at all. And it would have been a better pilot if you'd had a little more complex of a villain.
Well, I think they did try to give Pike at least some kind of a backstory.
Yes,
because they reveal that. Well, hey, he used to be a motorcycle cop just like Jay. He was his partner. And apparently Pike, we find out, had a hijacking operation on the side. And Jay, I guess, had found out about it or something. Found that he was had this truck full of weapons. So consequently, he ends up, something happens and he gets all scarred up. And
he says apparently it was Jay who gave him his scars.
Yes.
Yeah, so whatever happened. So apparently there's this bad blood to make it personal. So that when he sees Jay's face on the TV, he's like, okay, we got to get this guy. I've got it seriously in for this guy. And so they set up this operation where it's like the same stretch of road and leads Jay there. Mm-hmm. And that's where the trap is formed.
Yeah, it's right, the old Dr. Doom's face was scarred.
Yeah.
Lex Luthor losing his hair. Yes, it was. That's what.
Yeah, and then it makes it personal between him and Barry because he's the guy who killed Barry's brother.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But then I think he's also a great vehicle to set up the mythos of the Flash, because obviously he talks to Lila about this red demon and what have you, and even among the bikers, he's like, you think everybody says he's fake. I know he's real. He'll come get you and all this kind of thing. And I think it's nice that we have this, like I said, this street level character because of the fact that you set up the mythic quality of the Flash, almost like Batman, because you have the criminals talk about the Batman or the Bat, and everybody's terrified. And here you have the terror of this red demon.
It's the Blur. Oh, wait, that's a different superhero
different
TV
series.
show.
I thought the same thing, Charles.
Yes. In fact, I was waiting for them to call them the Blur or the Streak, I believe at one point they go on.
That's what they call it. We'll talk about the Streak next time.
Yes.
So just wait for that. We'll get there. We'll get there eventually. Mm-hmm. All right, anything else about this pilot that we didn't cover? I know we talked a lot about it, so.
Not on my end, Charles. I mean, because I could talk all day about this, but I'm going to leave it here. So it's... Yeah.
I was just going to say, I probably have to, like me, you probably have to exercise some self-restraint because we could just keep going and going.
Yeah, that's the case. So it was just wonderful to revisit it. That's what I'm going to say. Thank you for, I'm so blessed and happy that we got the opportunity to revisit a show that I so love.
Absolutely. It's fun to talk about. And for what it's worth, I was sitting here going, I remember on... when I was doing the Small Council Matters, the Game of Thrones podcast, we did an hour and a half episode on like a 10-minute teaser. It's like, oh my goodness, how long are we going to talk when the actual episodes come out? So I was like, 2 hours talking about an hour and a half pilot. That's actually pretty reasonable for us.
Right, that's not bad.
Yeah, exactly.
We've done worse, way worse on Ghostway.
Yes, so. Indeed.
All right,
I don't have anything else.
All right. Anybody got any favorite quotes of the episode they want to share?
I have a few.
Okay, go for it.
If you have the patience, Charles, I'll go through a few of them.
All right.
Well, first off, to go back to the point of Pike, there's the exchange between Pike and Flash where Pike says to him, "What are you and where do you come from?" And Flash is like, I came from you, Pike. You made me when you killed my brother. And Pike is like, I killed a lot of men's brothers. Then also the one where he's holding up the bag of dog food is like, Barry's like, now I know I'm in trouble. Even the kibbles starting to look good. And finally, a beautiful, beautiful one that we have at the ending of the episode is where Barry to his nephew Sean goes, anytime you need me, I'll be there for you. I couldn't run like your dad, but I'll be there in a flash.
Yeah.
Very nice.
That's one of the things I did like is that they actually took time in this episode to okay, Jay has a kid
Yes.
who's just lost his father.
Yeah.
And they actually had, they actually devoted an entire final scene to having Barry sit down with the kid, Sean, and talk about Barry's brother and Sean's father, and giving him the medal and everything. And I thought that was a really nice way to end the episode.
It's very heartwarming.
Yeah.
It was a very great ending. Those were my two quotes as well. But I did have the one
I'm sorry, Jesse.
No, that's good. We've already said this one, but I think it's worth in the official quote section, right? Is when Henry, sure, lab boys are important, but real cops, work the street facing the scum of the earth with nothing to back you up but, and then all three of them at the same time, a gun, a badge,
and a prayer.
Yes. Which, as we mentioned, shows the amount of love that they have for their dad, but they also not in the same seriousness, but when Chris was younger, we went into a Subway and we ordered food, and the lady's like, "Oh, do you want drinks and a chip?" And I said no, and I looked at Chris and I said, "We got chips and drinks at the house." And that has become any time we order food, Chris will go, "Yeah, and we got chips and drinks at the house, Dad." So
Nice.
All right. How about you, Charles? Do you have a couple that we didn't cover?
Yeah, I'll just do a couple, because I know we're running long, but I like the beginning. I hinted about this earlier. I said where Linda Park shows up at the crime scene, and she's like, "You're not with the homicide department, are you?" And Barry replies, "No, crime lab. Want to film us pouring plaster into tire tracks?"
Yes.
And Linda's like to her cameraman, she's like, "Cut it. Let's see if we can find a real detective." And then Julio steps up and is like, "Well, see if you can find us a real newscaster while you're at it. I swear, she was on the shopping channel selling earrings last week."
That was a great
Burn.
line. Yes.
And then lastly, Barry in the interrogation room with Lila, talking about the Flash, the kind of urban legend that the Flash has become, saying, "Pretty frightening how you and your friends were caught last night. What was it again, a demon? The guys around the station think you're all on drugs, or crazy, but I know better. I know you really did see a demon. He was as red as blood, wasn't he? In fact, like a flash." Say, that's catchy. So if you care about Pike, you'll tell us where he is, because Lila, if we don't find him, the Flash will.
Nice.
Dun-dun-dun-dun. Dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun. All right, so what's everybody's ratings? Jesse, we'll start with you first. What's your rating for this one?
So I really enjoyed this, despite the concerns about the villain. I watched this again. I was happy. It brought me back to 1990. I'm so excited to be watching this. So I'm giving it 8 out of 10 half-eaten frozen TV dinners.
Very nice. Very nice. And Nick, how about you? What's your rating?
I might be a little bit biased because this show means so much to me, but I'm going to give this 9 out of 10 Thunderbolt symbols.
Oh, very nice. Very nice.
Oh, I like that. I'm
going to split the difference.
Okay.
So this is more a sentimental favorite, but I do see some of its flaws, obviously, especially compared to the 2014 series, which we'll talk about next time. So I'm going to give it 8.5 out of 10 electric bolts across the moon, because if you noticed, they did a great kind of Batman movie homage. Because if you remember in the 1989 Batman movie, they had this one shot where the Batwing goes up for no apparent reason.
Yeah, you have to have that shot.
above the clouds, and positions itself exactly so it looks like the bat signal in the sky, putting the Batwing against the moon. So the Flash does the exact same thing, only when there's all this electricity because, they're fighting at this electric plant. There's all this sparkage and the electric, currents and bolts, whatever, shooting out. And one of them just kind of shoots across the sky, just so happens to recreate the Flash logo on the moon with using that bolt of lightning. So
very convenient.
Very nice.
Quite convenient, but it's cheesy, yes.
We love it.
But I loved it.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Phantom Zone news, obviously we're running long, so I don't really have time. But I will say that Marvel announced a ton of Disney Plus shows at the Disney's 2020 Investor Day. So if you want all the details on that, I do have it on my blog, Damn Good Coffee in the Hot. If you want to check that out, I did a big long post about all the news that came out of that. So if anybody wants to check it out, a lot of cool stuff. Got some new shows that we weren't aware of, or we finally got the title of the Nick Fury Show and more. So if you want some more information on that, please check out my blog, Damn Good Coffee in the Hot. I got it posted. And don't have any Fandom Zone fan mail this time, sadly. But if you want to reach us, please write to us, phantomzonecast@gmail.com. That's phantomzonecast@gmail.com. If you want to share your thoughts about the Flash 1990 pilot or anything else we have coming up, drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you. Or you can reach us on Twitter @PhantomZoneCast on Twitter, Facebook, The Phantom Zone Podcast, or Instagram @PhantomZonePodcast. And Jesse, where can they reach you in the meantime?
Well, since we are going long, I'm on Twitter @JesseJacksonDFW. Please check us out there. You guys know what the other podcast I do. So I'm going to turn away to Nick.
Okay. Nick, how about you? Where can they find you on the interwebs?
Okay. Well, I do host a Whiskey and Cigarettes show with fans of country music. To check that out, you can visit our website. That's whiskeyandcigarettesshow.com. Also, I do host Happiness and Darkness, the superhero movie podcast. If you want to join us there to discuss your favorite superhero movie, you can send us an email at happinessanddarknesshow@gmail.com. Also, I do host Gold Standard, the Oscars podcast, along with Zan Sprouse and Rachel Friend. If you want to join us there to discuss your favorite Best Picture winner, you can email us at goldstandardoscars@gmail.com. And what about you, Charles?
Well, Nick, of course, you can reach me at Charles Skaggs on Twitter, at Charles Skaggs on Instagram, Facebook, Charles Skaggs in Hilliard, Ohio, and my blog of geeky things. Gotta do that.
Damn good coffee. And hot.
Damn Good Coffee and Hot, where I talk about comic book, sci-fi news, like I said, news of Disney Plus shows and more, news of my other podcasts I do for Southgate Media Group, including, Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast, where we just had comic book artist and writer Tom Zoller talking The Lodger on that. That was a lot of fun. And we'll be talking Peter Capaldi era, The Husbands of River Song with Hannah Scarapa, so I hope everybody checks that out. Titan Talk, the Titans podcast, which is on hiatus at the moment. But, Jesse and Nick, we're waiting for Titan Season 3 and Doom Patrol Season 3. If in the meantime, if you want to do a rewatch of what's been out there, check out our podcast. I think you enjoy it. And then Ghost with the Twin Peaks podcast I do with Zan Sprouse, where we talk all things Twin Peaks, David Lynch, et cetera, et cetera. And, we just did our Criterion Collection review of The Elephant Man, the David Lynch film, and then next time we're going to be going back to Twin Peaks for a very special episode where we're reviewing a Season 2 Twin Peaks episode in memory of David Lander, who played Tim Pinkle on the show and also played like Squiggy on Laverne and Shirley and more. So we're kind of doing it as a memory to him. And then Drunk Cinema that I also do with Zan Sprouse, where we've talked previously, Batman 1989, and also Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And then coming up this week, we're going to be recording our third episode as we talk the ultimate Christmas movie, Die Hard, which I think a lot of people are looking forward to. And what better time than right now to talk about Die Hard, right? So it's going to be a lot of fun. I hope everybody checks that out as well. So thank you guys for listening. Thanks for indulging our Flash obsessions. Really appreciate that. Nick, I hope it lived up to the hype for you.
Oh, I was so excited, yes. Thank you so much for allowing me to vent my Flash fandom, Charles. I was so happy about it.
It makes me just want to go through the entire series, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
I know, right?
It's terrible.
I just want to keep talking about this, but I guess probably for everybody else's sake, we probably shouldn't. Jesse, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciated you having both you and Nick here.
It was nice,
and I hope you had a good time. I
had a great time, Charles. It was a fun subject. I love the idea that you guys are so passionate. If someone asked me, well, tell me about your friend Charles.
Oh God!
The first thing I would say is a massive Flash fan. I would have said that before I said Doctor Who, because of our Secret Origin and the Titan Talk, that was you were known as the Flash guy. So
Yes.
I knew that I would have fun discussing this. I did not realize how much Nick loved about the series, so I am so glad I joined you guys. And hey, we're not done, are we?
Well, no, because, this was episode 199.
Mm-hmm.
So what comes next? Well, hey, the big 200th episode of the Fandom Zone.
Woohoo!
So, yeah, it's been a long time coming. We've had various hosts. Yours truly has been around through all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, people still keep coming back. So we want to celebrate this. It's been a long time, like I said. And, well, hey, we talked the 1990 Flash pilot. So what better way to celebrate our 200th episode than by talking the 2014 Flash pilot?
Nice.
That's obviously the one starring Grant Gustin as the Flash, Barry Allen, Candace Patton as Iris West, got Thalos as Cisco Ramon, and lots of other great people. So this is something I think it's going to be great after talking this pilot to kind of contrast that and to see the similarities and the differences with the 2014 pilot next week. Mm-hmm. And I hope everybody else is as excited about talking about it as I am.
Yeah, it's going to be blessed. I really do think this will be fun. Especially, I'm glad we did it this way because there is a lot to compare. So, tune in, kids. This is going to be a fun one.
And I think it is good that we did this in chronological order because
absolutely.
Because obviously next week we're probably going to talk about a lot of what the 2014 pilot did that the 1990 pilot did or didn't do.
Exactly.
And the differences there.
Yeah, it makes a ton more sense to do it this way for sure.
Absolutely.
So I hope everybody enjoys it. It's going to be our big 200th episode. So if you want to come celebrate with us or you just want to wish us well, write to us at PhantomZoneCast, like I said, on Twitter or PhantomZoneCast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. And we'll see you next time right here on the Phantom Zone podcast. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Ciao.